I have something to probably rain on the parade of some Panthers fans. I'm coming back after 2 weeks. I'm going to immediately just Debbie Downer the heck out of this. Trading back always sounds good. You have the 8th overall pick, trading back. Well, we'll just move down to 15. We'll get the player we love, and we'll pick up a second-round pick. It sounds unbelievable, and if you can pull it off, it is. And is there a chance they'll pull it off? Sure. There always is a chance, right? I never go into anything saying 100% this or 0% that. But it's always the fans' favorite thing to do. Trade back, get the player we want anyway, and get more. On your little mock draft simulators online, I traded back. I now have every pick in the first round in 2028, and I still got Colston Loveland in the late first. It's like, what? How'd you pull that off? Well, I only had to refresh and start over 17 times. Okay, it's not exactly how it works, but good try. So Daniel Jeremiah had he's a NFL Network draft analyst. Had a open media availability. Dennis caught some of the audio involving the Panthers, and if a trade back is possible, this is what he had to say.
That's a good discussion, and it's a good debate in the room. I mean, I don't think you want to do it just to get a 4th-round pick, but I think if you can, get some quality resources, get another pick on day 2, he's a great player, and I wouldn't have any criticism if they decide we're just going to stick and pick him and go forward. But when you have this many holes, and this is a draft that does have a lot of talent and depth, on the defensive front, I'd be interested in that option. I'm not saying, that's the right or the wrong way to go. I just think, man, there's so many holes there, and you could fill a bunch of them if you could slide back a little bit. So, I think that's a good debate and a good discussion. I could spend 10 minutes and argue it each way. So they just have to see what they get. I definitely think you'd want to get a premium. I don't think you just do that just to go back and get an extra pick.
The player he was talking about, who Daniel Jeremiah has mocked to the Panthers, is Jalen Walker out of Georgia, the outside linebacker. Here's the part where I ran on the parade. It takes 2 to tango. And what Daniel Jeremiah said there is true, right? If you can get a premium pick, if you can get a day 2 pick, an early 3rd, a second rounder, you move back and not that far, absolutely you do it. The hard part is finding someone that wants to give you that. I have, whatever car you drive. Would you sell it? Probably not. But if someone gave you $100,000, yeah. The hard part is finding someone that'll give you $100,000 for it. And here's the other thing about trading up that is or trading back that is difficult, especially in this year's draft. I've been fortunate enough over the last however many years to talk to enough insiders, enough GMs, and things like that. And one of the biggest differences, I think, between the actual teams and how they evaluate the draft and how, we evaluate the draft is tiers versus big boards, right? Because we, meaning media, myself included, we go top 100 prospects and we put them in order. Teams oftentimes, whatever verbiage, the Ravens call them buckets. They put players in buckets. A lot of teams call them tiers. Some call them groups. And what that means is they don't necessarily decide we like this guy 6th best in the draft, we like that guy 7th best in the draft. They decide we like this group of 4 second tier. We like this group of 7 in the 3rd bucket. And you don't trade up ever when there's more than one person left in a tier or a bucket. Right? If you have 6 guys that are pretty close, you just put them in a bucket. So, and then if there's only one left in that bucket, then you trade up because you see them as a step above whatever's left, the lower buckets, the lower tiers, the lower groups. So, you see Daniel Jeremiah, you see Mel Kiper, you see Todd McShay, you see all of the big boards and the mock drafts, and that all is linear. This is the best player, this is the 2nd best player, this is the 3rd best player, this is the 4th best player. Tune in next week where I update it, and I might flip 3 and 4. The teams don't think that way. They think in groups. So in this year's draft, I think there's a really good, really high group of defensive linemen. A bucket of defensive linemen, if you will. I think there's a really good, really high group of running backs. I think there's a really good, really high group of maybe safeties. The issue is running backs and safeties don't get drafted in the top 10 very often.
Very rarely.
And defensive line, I think the Panthers would have to get lucky and have like 4 of the top 7 picks be defensive linemen to get to the point where edge rushers, interior defensive linemen are at the end of a bucket by 8, in which case someone else would be willing to move up and take that pick. Because if Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, and I mean, name whoever you want to out of your favorite defensive linemen, if there's 4 of them available at the 8th pick, nobody's going to be like, we got to trade up to 8 to get them, because they could just wait and see which one of those guys falls to 15 and give up less to trade up to 15. You need to wait till there's 1 left in a tier, 1 left in a bucket. And unfortunately for the Panthers, I think there's a bucket of quarterbacks. Right, I think Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders, maybe Jackson Dart, are being seen as that top bucket.
Those are tiny buckets.
True. So if one of them is available at 8, suddenly trading back becomes a whole different beast. Quarterback needy team only has to trade up to 8 instead of 3. You might get something real. But if they're both gone in the top 4, they're both gone in the top 6, right? With the Raiders taking maybe the second or third of them, that's tough. So you're not just looking at the draft saying, I would like to trade back, as like a declaration of regardless of what the scenario is, we have more needs than one. I declare a trade back.
Go full Michael Scott with it.
Yeah, you can't. Like, imagine submitting a trade to the league. Like, this pick has been traded to the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings are like, what? We didn't even know this happened.
Since when?
The Panthers will be taking their next 2 first-round picks and a third. It's like, no. Like, you need to and this draft, the 8th pick, it just, granted, we're still very early on, right? If there's still the possibility of some kind of unknown edge rusher running a 4.4 and all of a sudden, oh, look at that, now everybody wants him. Like, there's combine changes, there's a pro day changes, there's more to come. But trading back and just saying I want to sounds good. Sounds good. And if you can pull it off, oftentimes is good. But it takes 2 to tango in any of those situations. The only thing the Panthers can 100% control is being prepared to make the 8th pick when the 8th pick comes around. That's what you can, like, the same is true the opposite way, right? Nobody can take the 8th pick away from you without you agreeing to it. So, like, if you want that pick, you can stick and pick and take whichever of the best players available is there. The dream scenario for the Panthers is they have 8 players in a bucket. We've got an 8-player top tier. That would be awesome for the Panthers. Then if, 7 of them go, it's an easy decision. You submit it in the first 2 seconds of the clock.
One thing that always factors into the draft as well is that there might be elite level players, but again, what positions do they play? For example, if there's a year like last year where there are a lot of high-end quarterbacks, who had 6 go in the top 12, teams more likely will be willing to trade up if they are desperate in need of a QB. Teams might need a defensive tackle, but they're not going to move up from like 15 to 8 to take a D tackle, most likely.
Especially not if they see, like, on the board at 8, 3 defensive tackles that they like.
Yeah, or like, you know what? There's one that could help us here where we're staying. So there's always that. Like, what does the draft as a whole look like? Like you said, it takes 2 to tango. Like, oh, move back. Okay, to whom? Like,
who wants to move up?
Yeah, exactly. But if there's such a great player at number 8 that a team's willing to trade up, I think the Panthers should take that guy.
It's
for a team that is in desperate need of high-end talent.
That's the other part is if I'm trying to think, there's really not a position. I guess offensive guard. If they had like the 18th pick and the number 1 offensive guard was generational, was sitting there, they could legitimately go, we don't need that right now, so we'll trade out of it. I don't think there's a single premium position that is worthy of the 8th pick for someone else that the Panthers can look at and go, we can do without this elite corner, edge rusher, wide receiver. Like there's none of that they can go like, we'll pass on that. You take him and we'll get, give us the value picks. It's just not there. And, oh, by the way, I don't think it's outlandish to think Jacksonville at 5 would be calling everyone saying you want to trade up. The Jets at 7 calling everyone you want to trade up. Like, the Panthers aren't going to be the first call to all of these teams.
I think the only way we would see a team make the desperate move to trade into the top 10 is if they absolutely convince themselves that they were in love with a quarterback not named Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward. Like, That's the only way I really, truly see it.
But the hard part with that is New Orleans, Chicago, San Fran, Dallas, Miami are the next 5 teams. None of them need a quarterback.
Yeah.
So you'd probably be a little comfortable knowing, unless they're trading to someone else, right? You got to start. Then Dan Morgan has to be a GM and go, well, we got this other team that wants a quarterback on the line, so you got to build that up because there's no real market in the next your pick, including the next 6 for the quarterback. I mean, and then there's wild cards. Maybe somebody loves Ashton Genty so much that they want to snipe him from Chicago, who's picking 10th or something like that. Maybe, but if that happens, then I don't really know the NFL like I think I do.